I came to myself in a room with dim lights. My head was pounding horribly. What am I doing here? I tried to stand up, but I felt the straps under the sheet. What was going on? Suddenly, a disheveled old man in a scientist's robe ran up to me. The old man with the mad look said that now it was possible to start experiments and left the room in a hurry. My stomach went cold. I pulled my hand up with all my might, and the straps began to creak. I yanked my hand again and the strap snapped. Wow, how strong I am. It's better to leave this place. I ran into the hallway in just a sheet. Creepy scientific instruments hung everywhere. What was he doing here? I already saw the exit, but suddenly I noticed in the mirror that the sheet had fallen off me. What's the matter with me? I stepped closer, dropped the sheet to the floor, and was speechless. I looked like some kind of robo-monster. 85% of my body was made of iron and parts connected by wires. But I had a human head. But then I heard the scientist's voice behind me. Where are you going? Panic seized me, and I ran for the door as fast as I could. The old man ran after me. It seemed that he was about to grab me. Out of desperation, I hit the door with my shoulder and it flew out with a crash. I didn't know where to run because I didn't even remember where I lived. Random passersby shouted at my back that I was a freak. I ran to a parking lot, hid among the cars, and looked around. There was no pursuit. The thought of this creepy scientist catching me made me feel uneasy. I sat in the parking lot until the evening and did not dare to go out. I looked at the cars and realized the last thing I remembered was getting into an accident. And I was in a wedding dress, but I didn't know if I was a robot even then. My memories were very fragmentary, but if I had a wedding, then there was a groom. That's something. I needed to find him somehow. Only he could help me remember who I really was. Night fell, and I ventured out of my hiding place to find a quieter place. Suddenly, a red light flashed on my chest. I didn't notice it at first, but soon my vision began to darken. Maybe I was running out of charge, like on my phone. I needed to try to charge myself. Oh man. Then an electric car passed me noiselessly. I barely managed to jump away, but stop. It was also somehow charged. I needed to find an electric vehicle charging station urgently. With the last of my strength, I trudged along the road. I thought I was going to pass out when I saw the lights of a station in the distance. If only they had electric recharging points. I quietly crept up to the station, looked around, and saw no wires, only hoses with gasoline. I was desperate, but suddenly, in the corner, I noticed a place with a wire. The station attendant was asleep behind the cash register. I crawled over to the wire, pulled it out, and plugged it into the socket on my chest. And wow, it fit! The light stopped blinking, and I felt my strength returning. But then a car pulled up at the station and shone its headlights on me. Heck, I looked around. The station attendant woke up and already noticed me. I didn't want to be arrested for theft. I took off, and in a couple of seconds, I was already very far away. When I was sure there was no pursuit, I stopped and sat down on the bench. Did I have to steal electricity from stations for the rest of my life now? In my desperation, I did notice a guy walking up to me. I wanted to run away, but he began to examine me with the words, "Wow, what a costume. What was he talking about?" Suddenly, the guy asked me for a link to my TikTok. What is TikTok? The guy laughed and showed me the app and two favorite accounts, Mermaids and Fire Girl. Popular superheroines. He decided that I was the same. I refused, but the guy thought I was being modest and still took a picture with me. I couldn't believe that someone would like me, because a bunch of people on the street just called me a monster. When he left, I thought about what he'd said. If this mermaid succeeded, I could also become famous, and then the groom from my past would see me and find me. This was the only way I could find out who I really was, a robot or a human, but I needed to get money for the phone. The next day I went to the park. I decided to take a picture with the children for money. The guy wanted a picture with me. At first, no one approached me, and I already thought that this was a stupid idea. But gradually, a whole queue was lined up for me. It turned out people love robots. But several times the kids called me a transformer. I tried not to pay attention, and by the end of the day, I had enough money for a smartphone. The next day, I registered in TikTok and made a couple of videos about my life. I was so worried when I uploaded them. But in vain, 500 people subscribed to me every day. A few weeks later, I was already one of the most popular bloggers and was even able to rent an apartment. I didn't think it would be so easy. People wrote hundreds of comments, but no one from the previous life ever appeared. And I so wanted to know, was I a robot or was I originally born a human? I didn't even know who I was. But in any case, I knew I had feelings, but the fans were only interested in how I changed and whether I can touch the water. Once, a follower with the nickname Joker asked how my mood was. I was surprised, because everyone thought that robots were not in the mood by 85%. The Joker almost immediately offered to meet and I agreed. He spoke to me as if I were an ordinary person. The very next day, I was waiting for him in the cafe, and then a guy sat down at my table and introduced himself as the Joker. His face was scarred, and I was terrified. He immediately reached out to me and began to repeat, "Don't leave me. I love you." Hell, he was a psychopath. I mumbled that I had a lot to do and ran as fast as I could. The Joker started writing to me on all social media, but I blocked him everywhere. That's it! No more face-to-face meetings with fans. I kept using TikTok, hoping that someone from my past would notice me. But nothing happened. One day, I was returning home from an autograph session and suddenly I heard someone's footsteps. I turned around and saw a dark silhouette. I picked up the pace, but someone was shouting after me, "We need to talk." Oh no, it's the Joker, the crazy fan. I quickly ran back to the house and locked the door. Was he following me? The Joker was shouting something under the windows, but I didn't dare look out. With shaking hands, I called the police, and an hour later, a couple of big guys arrived and dragged the Joker away. I let out a sigh of relief and tried to sleep. This was already dangerous. I needed to delete TikTok and find another way to find out the truth about my past. The next day, I went to a fan meeting. There, I decided to say that I was done with TikTok and directly asked for help from my followers. When everyone gathered, I took a deep breath and said, "Friends, I don't really remember anything from my past. I don't know if I'm really a robot or a human." The room fell silent. I probably shouldn't have said that, but suddenly the audience burst out laughing. From all sides, it was hurt. She hypes! I had never felt so hurt in my life. In desperation, I ran to the back exit. None of the fans believed me. What a fool I was. When I opened the back door, I bumped into someone. I started to apologize, but then I was taken aback. This was the scientist. He looked even more creepy than he had a month ago. I backed away, but he pulled a remote out of his pocket and pressed the button. I immediately collapsed to the ground. What was going on? I couldn't even move. The scientist took my hand and dragged me along the ground. "Help me!" But no one heard my screams. I was finished. The scientist loaded me into his car and, muttering that the experiments were not over yet, got behind the wheel. The last thing I saw was the confused Joker sitting in the car outside the club. At that moment, the red light on my chest flashed again, and I blacked out. I came to myself in the same room. The scientist muttered softly that he was disappointed with my behavior. "I hope the next model will be more accommodating," he added. The scientist took out a saw and held it into my lap. Just a little bit and he would cut me into pieces. "No, please." But suddenly I heard some noise. The door opened and the Joker ran into the room. Behind him, the crowd of my fans was roaring. I couldn't believe my eyes. The fans threw the scientist to the floor and tied him up. The Joker took the remote out of his pocket and turned on my body. I didn't understand anything. Why would he do this? He was my crazy fan. But the Joker asked abruptly, "Don't you recognize me, Jen?" I frowned, puzzled. "What are you talking about?" The Joker smiled and said his name was Kyle. He was my groom. And I was kidnapped on my wedding day. These words made my throat go dry. So I was looking for him all this time. Kyle told me that we had loved each other since childhood and wanted to get married. But on the day of the wedding, we had an accident. Kyle was saved and he escaped with scars. And then he stopped talking. What happened to me? Kyle hesitated and said, "And you died right at the scene of the accident." I couldn't believe it. But how? Here I stand. I'm alive. Kyle said that before the funeral, my body was stolen, and he tried to find me, but in vain. He no longer believed that he would succeed, but suddenly he saw an interview with a robot that had my face. He thought he was imagining it. But he found me in TikTok and was stunned. I was alive. Tears welled up in my eyes, and suddenly I saw in the disfigured face of the Joker my dear Kyle, whom I had loved so much all my life. Oh, Kyle, it's so good that you found me. A few months later, we got married. Our wedding was discussed by the whole country. After that, twice as many people followed me, but I didn't care anymore. It was enough for me to have one person who saw me not as a freak from TikTok, but as an ordinary girl who also had feelings. I looked at Kyle and saw the most beautiful man on earth without even noticing the scars on his face. After all, love and kindness, that's what makes us truly beautiful. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you. I'm a psychic. My gift is to heal with my hands. But this time, the client was special, Bill White. He wanted to get rid of the memories that tormented him terribly. I touched him. But suddenly, everything went dark. At that moment, a strange vision came to me. Someone is approaching my mom. She runs to the stairs, wants to go down. And then, I saw that my mom was lying on the steps unconscious. And up there was Bill White, my client. The vision ended in a bright flash. And I went blind. Panicked, I called out to him, but all I heard was the door slam. He ran away. I was terrified. It was pitch black, and I couldn't even make out the outlines of objects. And the last thing I saw was my mom's murder. What happened? Everyone in town knew I could heal, but I've never had a vision. I just helped people get rid of their pain. And that's all. Although my own pain hasn't gone away for years, it was different. For as long as I can remember, I have been tormented by the question, who is responsible for the death of my mom? It happened when I was 6. I only vaguely remembered crying over my mom's body, and then the policeman took me to the orphanage. After a few years of living in the orphanage, I realized I had a gift. At first, I healed children in the orphanage, and after graduation, I was given an apartment. There I received patients. Those who were recovering told each other about it, and people began to come to me from all over the city. Apparently, Bill White came to me the same way, and it seems that in our session, I discovered the ability to see the past. Perhaps Bill knew something about my mom's murder. I was trying to figure out how to find him. All I remembered about him was a mole above his upper lip, just like mine. Then I thought of Matt, the cop I'd helped with a terrible migraine. I should call him. But it was difficult to move by touch. I was constantly dropping something or hitting the corners of the furniture. There was darkness everywhere. Finally, I found my phone by touch and went to contacts from memory. I started calling everyone and finally heard Matt's voice on the phone. It worked. I told him about the strange client and my vision on my mom's death. But Matt said that he was suspended from the service and no longer engaged in investigations. At that moment, all my hopes were dashed. I had no one else to turn to. An hour passed, 2 hours, and all of a sudden, Matt called me back. He said that he had thought it over and was ready to help. And he had his reasons. Matt said that when he was working as a detective, his wife was killed. He tried to find the culprit himself, collected evidence, and found the address of the person. But in the end, he didn't have time to arrest him. The killer committed suicide. After that, Matt couldn't do business like he used to, and he retired. Every killer must be punished. Matt finished. An hour later, he was at my house. Matt asked for my laptop to hack into the police database. After a long search, we found the street where Bill White lived. Matt was trying to get the house number. But suddenly, the system blocked us. Heck, at least we had a lead. In the evening, we reached the outskirts of the city. We had to look for White here. We went to all the houses on the street. No one heard of Bill. We were already going back. Then Matt noticed the house with boarded up windows. We got closer and went up to the porch, and suddenly, I felt dizzy. I grabbed a railing and the vision came to me again. Fake images appeared and I realized that Bill White was definitely here. We had to get inside the house. Matt kept saying that there was a patrol running around the area, and if we got caught, we'd be arrested for breaking and entering. But I said that I would go alone or with him. I would get into this house. Matt sighed heavily and agreed. With a terrible crash, he broke off a couple of boards at the entrance to the house. I froze. Did someone hear us? We quickly went inside. I asked Matt to stay close while I read White's energy. I felt the walls and the remaining furniture in the rooms and hoped that another vision would come to me. Suddenly, Matt stopped. He said that there was a photo on the wall. There's a man with a girl. She looks like you. Matt chuckled. He took the picture down from the wall, and I picked it up. Another flash. A vision. Someone gives me a toy and... Then I heard a car drive up to the house with the siren on. Let's go, Matt whispered to me, and a second later, there was a terrible crash as the cops broke into the house. I hesitated, but Matt grabbed my arm, and we ran as fast as we could. I heard the cop chasing us, but at the last moment, Matt pushed him away and we ran out of the house. I was exhausted, but Matt said we couldn't stop. Only when we were far enough away did he call a taxi. All the way, I clutched that picture in my hands, but the vision didn't appear. I asked Matt to describe the man in the photo. White cheekbones, a mole near the lips, Matt said. It was Bill White. I remembered that he had the same mole as me. I asked Matt to take the photo to the station and find out something about White. Who was this girl? Maybe she would give us another clue. Matt said he wasn't welcome at the police station, but he tried to do something. Matt didn't answer his phone the next day, and it wasn't until late afternoon that he called. It turned out that he was detained, and he was in the police station. He was turned in by the same cop who ran after us. Matt said he would only be released on bail. Hell, I was the one who put him where he used to put criminals. I had to help him. I groped my way to the locker where I kept my savings and took out all the money. I hoped that would be enough. With difficulty, I got out of the house and went to the sound of cars on the highway. I had never hitched a ride blindly before. Finally, some guy took pity and agreed to give me a ride. When Matt was released, I told him I couldn't ask for his help anymore. If he got caught again, he could be sent to prison. But Matt said that we would see this through. Together, he swore on his police honor that he would not back down. Oh, Matt. He also said that while he was in the police station, he found out something. The man in the photo was really Bill White. Matt hesitated a little. He sighed heavily and said that Bill was my father. No way. So the girl in the photo with him was me? Resentment seethed inside me. How could he leave me? I was beginning to think that White had something to do with my mom's death. Why else would he run away after she was killed? The next morning, we drove to one of the poor neighborhoods where White might be. Matt talked to the beggars, but no one knew anything. We were about to leave. But then a ragamuffin said he knew White. For a couple of dollars, he told us that this strange White recently lived in an abandoned building. And then I felt he was right. White was very close. I followed my gut. Matt and I went down to the basement of a house, and the feeling grew stronger. White was here. I called his name and immediately heard quick footsteps. White decided to run away again. Police! Freeze! Matt shouted and ran after Bill. Matt quickly caught up with him. I heard him push Bill to the floor and then the handcuffs clicked. Bill was breathing heavily and no longer struggling. Then Matt began the interrogation. White admitted that all his life he was tormented by a conscience for what he did to his wife. He hoped that the psychic would help him get rid of the heartache, but I felt bad, and he was afraid. We were fighting. I pushed my wife and she fell down the stairs. White said painfully. I still hate myself for running away. For leaving my daughter. I tried to find her, but without success. I'd like to know how is she now. White finished. I was shaking and couldn't speak. But in the end, I decided. Bill, I'm the girl you left behind. I'm your daughter. There was a tense silence. A moment later, Bill burst into tears and begged for forgiveness. Tears began to run down my cheeks too, and I realized that I bared no grudge against Bill. And suddenly, I've got my sight back. Unbelievable! Seeing the world again was a miracle. And I realized that as soon as I forgave my father, my illness went away. It's like I've been given a second chance to make things right. I didn't know what to do next. Matt was waiting for me to call the cops because my dad had actually killed my mom. But I wasn't in a hurry to get my phone out. All my life I've wanted to punish a murderer. But do I want it now? I was sitting in a cafe with my friend Grace and talking about the wedding. It was already in 3 days. I took a sip of coffee and suddenly noticed something white in it. It was a tooth. Grace and I were in shock and were about to call the waiter when suddenly one more tooth plopped into the cup right out of my mouth. I froze in horror. No, that was not true. I was a college student and I was preparing to marry Glam. We loved each other and already lived together. I was just returning home. I wanted to see Glam as soon as possible and suddenly some guy abruptly snatched the bag out of my hands. Before I knew it, he already disappeared into the crowd. Heck, there was a wallet there. At least I left my phone in my pocket. I dialed Glam and told him about what had happened. He immediately replied not to get upset and go home. He and Mandy were already waiting for me. Mandy was Glam's half-sister. She used to hang out with us a lot. When I got home, Mandy and Glam were chatting in the kitchen. I kissed Glam on the cheek, to which Mandy said that she might get jealous, and then she smiled. Sisterly, of course. We sat down to drink tea. I told Mandy about my dream, the perfect smile at the wedding. I wanted to do teeth whitening, but as luck would have it, my wallet was stolen. Mandy immediately waved her hand and said that she would pay for an appointment with a dentist she knew. It would be a wedding present. I hugged Mandy. Glam had such a cool sister. The very next day, I went to the dentist, but as soon as I was in a dentist chair, he reached for my tooth with forceps. I pressed myself into a chair and shouted that I had come for a whitening. The dentist slapped his forehead, said that he was working hard, and reached for other tools. The result exceeded my expectations. The smile was snow-white. After thanking the doctor, I went home and immediately went to bed for fatigue. In the morning, I met with my friend Grace. I wanted to brag about my smile, but in the cafe, instead of bragging, I screamed in horror. My teeth were falling out one by one, and there was nothing I could do. The people around me started looking at me. I jumped up and immediately ran back to the dentist. He had to fix everything. But after the examination, he said that I was allergic to a whitening agent. He could make me implants, but they had an unreasonable price. I had no money of my own, and I fell into despair. No, right before the wedding, the dentist offered to put gold-plated crowns, but I waved it off. I don't need anything from you. When I returned home in tears, I noticed a parcel on the doorstep. This was the wedding dress that Glam ordered for me. Maybe this would cheer me up. I immediately opened the box in anticipation, but froze. Instead of a white wedding dress, there was a dirty brown one inside. I didn't understand anything, but Glam couldn't be wrong, and his last name was on the box. Only the initials were different. Apparently, they confused. I immediately called the salon to sort it out, but because of the fallen teeth, I lisped a lot, and the administrator did not understand a word. In the end, I lost one more tooth. I hung up and threw the phone on the couch. Heck. And then the phone rang again. Glam. God, I can't talk. I had to reject the call and text that I would be at a friend's house. I didn't want him to see me like this. Glam also reminded me that we had a family dinner with his parents in the evening. They were travelers, and they came right before the wedding to see me for the first time. Very timely. But I could not refuse. In the evening, Glam, his sister Mandy, and I were waiting for their parents at the restaurant. Glam wanted to kiss me, but I moved away from him to Mandy. She asked me to show a smile, and I immediately grabbed a glass and drank a strange-tasting juice, just not to communicate with anyone. Gradually, I relaxed. My head suddenly began to spin. I wanted to talk endlessly, and I didn't care about my teeth. I was lisping, and Glam was looking at me in disbelief, but suddenly my favorite song started playing. I immediately jumped up and started to have fun like it was the last chance of my life. The others were sitting in their seats looking at me in shock. Boring people. Then an older couple came into the restaurant, but the man seemed so handsome, like Glam in old age. I immediately started flirting with him and dragging him to dance, but the man got angry and pushed me away, and I tripped and pushed the table. Worried, Glam helped me up and rudely told me that these were his parents. Parents? We made an interesting acquaintance. I laughed, and then I felt a few more teeth fall out. One of them fell right into the glass of Glam's mother. But she was in such shock that she did not notice it and raised the glass to her mouth. She took a sip, and the tooth struck in her throat. The woman choked and barely cleared her throat. Everyone was looking at me in shock, and I didn't care. I laughed out loud, standing in the center of the hall. But Glam did not share the joy, but only looked upset and shook his head. And then the guard came up to me to sit me down. No, I will not give up without a fight. I grabbed the food from the guests' plates and started throwing the chicken at the guards. But I was still captured, and Glam took his parents and left the restaurant. I wanted to run after them, but the guards held me tightly. Hey, let go! My fiancé is there! I almost pulled away when suddenly I fell, and then there was darkness. I woke up already in the cell with a terrible headache. I couldn't remember anything. What kind of filth was mixed into my juice? And then I felt that I had no teeth at all. I looked more like a homeless woman, not a bride. Grace went to bail for me and told me that I had been brawling for about an hour and the guards had called the cops to keep me in the cell. I was horrified to remember the whole nightmare. Glam would not forgive me. After thanking Grace, I immediately went to Glam. I needed to save the relationship, but Mandy met me on the threshold. I was glad, but she suddenly snapped that she would not let me in. Hey, I have something important to tell Glam. But she stood her ground. I clenched my fists. No, Glam had to find out the truth before he broke up with me. Abruptly pushing Mandy away, I rushed into Glam's room. He looked at me with a mixture of resentment and pain, and I took a deep breath. It was difficult to speak without teeth, but I tried. Glam, I didn't mean for this to happen. I love you. But then Mandy started dragging me out the door and shouting at him not to believe the air-headed girl. Tears streamed down my cheeks. This was not true. At the door, in despair, I confessed, I'm pregnant with your baby. Mandy immediately started shouting that the child was definitely not his and tried to push me out the door, but this time, Glam told her to stop. Mandy reluctantly let me out, and Glam doubtfully asked why I hadn't told him earlier. I sobbed. It was supposed to be a surprise for the wedding, but now I'm not sure that there will be a wedding. And these teeth began to fall out after Mandy's dentist. The dress he ordered turned out to be brown, strange juice, as if everyone's is against our marriage. Glam stood for a few seconds and thought. I was ready for the worst. But he suddenly said, I didn't order a dress for you, but there was your last name. And then I looked at his sister in shock and suddenly realized there were her initials on the box with the dress. And she recommended a dentist to me. Mandy began to slowly step back and kept telling Glam not to listen to my nonsense. Glam picked up the phone and threatened that he would call the dentist and find out everything from him. He wouldn't want to lose his license and cover for Glam's sister. Mandy clenched her fists and suddenly screamed that she had been in love with Glam since childhood, and I was the third wheel in their wonderful relationship. That's why she tried to ruin the wedding. She set this whole thing up with my teeth, put poison in the juice, but everything was useless, and therefore she would have to take matters into her own hands. The next second, Mandy suddenly attacked me, shouting that she would not give up Glam. But Glam pulled her away, growling that Mandy should not dare to approach me again. You are just a sister to me, Glam said, and she is my love. Then Glam looked into my eyes and finished, my destiny and my bride. I was ready to melt with happiness. Of course, the wedding had to be postponed a little, and it turned out to be much more modest. Glam gave most of the money to my dental implants. But still, we had a wedding and it was beautiful. Mandy was not invited. There were enough adventures without her. Glam even got into a fight with a witness and was left with a broken tooth. But this only added laughter to the happiest day of our lives. I realized that even the closest people can make mistakes, but no obstacle will break true love. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you!